Well, everybody, welcome, and who's joining us, and we are excited to get started here in just a couple minutes.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It's 5:30. I figure we'll give people a few more minutes to roll on. It seems like we kind of slowly are seeing an uptick in people. Joe, if you just want to welcome everybody, and maybe we give it till 5:34 or 5:35, and then we can get started.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a todos a esta reunión de visión comunitaria. Les vamos a dar unos minutos para que nos llegue más gente. Pero bienvenidos a todos.
Good evening, everybody. We'll give everybody just a few more minutes, and we'll get started here in 2 or 3 more minutes.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a todos. Les vamos a dar unos minutos más para los que todavía están llegando.
All right, maybe we should go ahead and get started. We got 38 folks on the call. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Good evening and welcome, everybody.
Buenas noches y bienvenidos a todos.
So just before we get started, just wanted to talk very briefly about why we're here. Really, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to just learn more about what you and your neighbors want to see in this area of Oak Cliff moving into the future.
Antes de comenzar, el propósito de esta junta esta noche comunitaria es, en verdad, el propósito es de aprender más de lo que a ustedes, la comunidad, están buscando y quieren para esta área de West Oak Cliff.
And so we're gonna, we will have a Spanish translation version of this meeting in a parallel breakout room, which we'll give instructions about here in a moment.
En unos minutos vamos a ir a otro cuarto, los de habla español, y ahí vamos a tener la presentación en español. Yo, su sirviente Joe Yáñez, voy a ayudarles con la traducción.
And so we will have the majority of the time for this meeting will be to hear from you about what you want, and then we'll have some time at the end for both groups to come back together, and we'll talk about next steps and answer any questions that you might have.
Así es que la mayor parte del tiempo aquí es de escuchar a ustedes, sus opiniones, sus comentarios, y luego después de hablar más de eso y escucharlos ustedes, vamos a regresar otra vez a esta junta comunitaria donde estamos todos.
But before we go any further, I want to introduce Councilmember Chad West, who's on the call, and let him speak for a few minutes about this planning effort. And we'll have Commissioner McGregor, Planning Commissioner for District 1, translate as well.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for having me here, and thank you to everyone who's joined tonight.
Este es el comisionado West y está dando las gracias a Daniel y a todos los que planearon la junta de hoy en la noche.
So the city staff, along with a task force that is made up of neighbors from all over the West Oak Cliff area, along with business owners and landowners, have been working on this plan for the last year, really since the summer of 2020.
Los profesionales de planeación de la ciudad y así como muchas otras personas con intereses en esta área han estado trabajando en este proyecto desde hace aproximadamente un año.
Why do we even want an area plan? Why is it important to have it? An area plan is a vision for the community.
¿Por qué queremos un plan para el área? ¿Por qué es importante? Pues porque un plan para el área incorpora la visión que tiene la comunidad para sí mismos.
If we as neighbors don't have a plan, then somebody else is going to make one for us.
Si nosotros como vecinos no tenemos un plan, alguien más nos lo va a crear.
I apologize in advance if you guys have heard this story before, but I'm going to tell the very short story of my experience with the El Corazon restaurant that was demolished about 2 years ago.
Con su permiso, les voy a contar una historia que ya he contado varias veces. Es acerca de la demolición de el restaurante Corazón. Eso se dio hace unos 2 años.
When I was first appointed to the Plan Commission as the Plan Commissioner for District 1, it was right after the aftermath of the El Corazon restaurant being demolished.
Cuando al principio, cuando se me dio, ¿cómo se dice? Cuando se me nombró comisionado en esta área, fue inmediatamente después de que haya habido ese problema de la demolición del restaurante El Corazón.
That former restaurant, which was loved by many people in Oak Cliff and a very cool, older, historic building, was replaced by a CVS, which is now right across the street from our streetcar stop.
Ese restaurante que era muy querido por tanta gente fue reemplazado por una farmacia CVS.
A lot of planning had gone into the areas all around this corner, but that corner had the old zoning that was there from the 1950s or 60s, which was never updated. And because that old zoning was there and there was no plan in place for that corridor, we ended up with what we have there now, a CVS, and then now next door to it, a 7-Eleven.
Existía, de hecho, un plan para esa área que estaba en los alrededores de donde estaba CVS. Sin embargo, esa propiedad y otra propiedad cerca de donde ahora está CVS eran las únicas partes de toda esa área que no habían formado parte del plan. Y por lo tanto, fue posible venir y derrumbar lo que existía ahí. Y ahí es donde ahora está CVS y ahí cerca un 7-Eleven.
And I'm not picking on either of those businesses because we need drugstores, we need gas stations, but having them right next door to where the city has invested, hundreds of millions of dollars in transit, next to a walkable area, in my opinion, there could have been better planning in place.
Y no es por criticar ni a la farmacia ni a la tienda de abarrotes de 7-Eleven, porque son servicios o negocios que se necesitan en la comunidad. Sin embargo, tener esos productos, esas tiendas en ese lugar precisamente, no entra dentro del plan de lo que se quería en esa área que está cerca de transporte y había pues una idea, una visión muy diferente.
I made a decision and a promise at that moment in time that I would not let us move forward as a community. I didn't think it was right for us to move forward as a community without putting good planning in place in areas in the district where we didn't have it.
En ese momento tomé la decisión y me hice la promesa de no permitir que eso vuelva a suceder y en vez que tengamos y creemos planes en las áreas, perdón, en las áreas que lo necesitan.
An area plan is like, you can equate it because it's a visionary thing. It's like making a decision to buy a car.
Un plan de área, en inglés un area plan, se puede pensar en él como cuando uno toma una decisión más grande, por ejemplo, tomar la decisión de comprar un carro.
It's a broad decision with a lot of choices. And within that area plan are a lot of different choices. Like if you think about buying a car, you've got to pick your color. You've got to pick your model. You've got to pick, your stereo system.
Entonces, una decisión amplia como esa, la de comprar un carro, después tiene como seguimiento otras decisiones más detalladas. Por ejemplo, escoger el color del carro, escoger qué tipo de radio o estéreo se le va a poner. Y no me acuerdo qué otra cosa dijo por ahí, pero ese tipo de decisiones.
And an area plan is the same way as buying a car, same sense as buying a car, because it's got a lot of elements. One piece is zoning. One piece is green space and parks.
Un plan de área, entonces, es similar al ejemplo de comprar un carro, porque un plan de área tiene también varios componentes. Un componente del plan de área es decidir qué tipo de zonificación es preferible. Otra parte de la decisión es decidir qué tipo de parques o cuántos parques queremos en esa área.
And you've got other pieces that are just as important. Your transportation, how are we going to move people around? Pedestrians, bike lanes, things like that. How public education fits into the area plan and the growth of DISD schools. Historic preservation of our neighborhoods, arts and culture, and economic development.
Asimismo, hay muchas otras partes que son parte de la decisión. La transportación, cómo vemos a la gente, qué tipos de tránsito queremos, tránsito público, carriles para las bicicletas, escuelas, and Chad, I think I got most of the items on your list.
You said historic preservation, right?
No, I did not. Y también muy importante, preservación histórica.
All right, thank you. The most important piece of this process is what we're doing tonight, and that is community engagement. It's the start of the community engagement process.
La parte más importante de este proceso es lo que estamos haciendo hoy en la noche, que significa recaudar el aporte de la comunidad y entender qué es lo que la comunidad quiere.
We have had that throughout the last year with involvement from representatives from all of the neighborhoods within West Oak Cliff. But tonight is where we open it up to everyone, and we want your feedback is what this is really all about.
Hemos estado recaudando aporte durante el último año de varios miembros representantes de las asociaciones de vecinos, pero hoy en la noche los aportes que se provean hoy son los más importantes de todos, porque hoy se abre para la comunidad entera la oportunidad de contribuir.
And with that being said, I want to just turn it back over to staff after, I do want to say thank you to the staff who's been working on this so hard. You should be very proud of your work, along with our task force that's been meeting very frequently over the last year, to Commissioner Anglin, to Commissioner McGregor for his work and as our Plan Commissioner, and then mostly to you who have come tonight to participate in this next phase in this process.
Entonces, quiere agradecer a Councilmember West, a todos los miembros a los empleados de la ciudad que han estado trabajando en esto bastante frecuentemente. También le da las gracias al comisionado Mike Anglin, que está encargado de este grupo, así como a mi servidor. Perdón, así como a su servidor. Pero especialmente le quiero dar gracias a todos ustedes que están aquí participando el día de hoy.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Councilmember West and Commissioner McGregor. We appreciate you being here and providing that wonderful explanation and overview.
Gracias a Concejal West y el señor Commissioner McGregor por darnos sobrevista de lo que se va a hacer aquí en esta área.
So just to get started tonight, a few ground rules. I know we're used to being on Zoom calls nowadays, but please keep your microphone muted. Please ask questions via the chat function. I know some of you may have called in via a phone, and if that's the case, you can speak aloud, but please keep your comments brief out of respect of time and out of respect of others.
Bueno, antes de empezar, por favor, mantengan su micrófono en silencio. Hagan preguntas a través de la función de chat. Y si no puede usar el chat, puede hablar en voz alta, pero mantenga sus comentarios breves por respeto a los demás.
Additionally, please be respectful with your comments and please be respectful of other people's comments. And then lastly, we will be doing some polling that will pop up on your screen, and that will be in the second half of the meeting. But just wanted to let people know that. So we'll have many ways for people to provide input.
Y por favor, sean respetuosos con sus comentarios y con los comentarios de los demás. Además, al fin de presentación, vamos a tener una encuesta. Ahí vamos a poder realizar preguntas durante toda la reunión. Las encuestas deberían aparecer automáticamente en su pantalla.
Okay, so this is when we'll break into the Spanish breakout room for folks who want to hear the presentation done by Joe. For folks who want to hear the English presentation, you don't need to do anything, just stay where you are. And Joe can read the instructions on how to access the breakout room. Joe just went through the breakout room, so Arturo, do you mind reading the instructions?
Sí, cómo no. Para los que necesitan explanación en español, por favor, váyanse para asistir a la reunión en español, dirígese a la sala en español. Arriba dice Breakout Sessions. Y si haces clic ahí, va a llegar a Join Breakout Sessions en español. Y ahí te encuentran con Joe, Yanez. Y en un rato yo también voy a estar ahí con ustedes. Así que para los que quieren español, váyanse ahí ahorita.
So I'll give everybody a few minutes to move over to that room if they're interested. It looks like we only have a few folks in there right now, but we'll get started here, and we'll give everybody another 2 minutes to go over there, and then I'll go ahead and get us started on the English presentation. And if you would like to attend the breakout session, but you're having trouble getting in there, please let us know via the chat, and we can try to help move you to that room.
Y si ustedes tienen, los que quieren estar en el cuarto en español, si están teniendo problemas, incluyen que sí están teniendo problemas en el chat y ahí te podemos ayudar.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing anybody. It looks like it's only staff that's currently in the breakout session, and I'm not seeing anybody put any comments in the chat that they're having issues going over there. So I'll give it just a few more seconds, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started with the English presentation.
Can you say that in Spanish as well, please?
Arturo just went to the other room, so I think I would struggle. I apologize. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started in the and provide the presentation in English. I think the overview that Councilmember West provided was great, but we'll kind of hit some of the highlights once again. But first, I just want to get started with introductions. I realized reading the chat that I actually never introduced myself to begin this meeting. So good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Church. I'm a planning manager in the city's planning and urban design department, and I'm helping run this planning effort for this area plan. Monique, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Monique Ward, and I am the engagement manager for this area planning process. I work with Daniel. Thank you all for attending this evening.
And so I know we obviously heard from Councilmember Chad West and Planning Commissioner Enrique McGregor. I also just want to let you know that there's other city staff that's on this call. We also will highlight the local DPD representative and code compliance representative later in this meeting. But I also really want to highlight the planning task force that has been so instrumental in helping this process along for the last year, led by Commissioner Anglin. We have representatives from many of the neighborhood associations and various stakeholders in the area. And so you can see who they are here on this list, and you're probably friends or neighbors with many of them. Oh, and I see, yes, Yolanda, I apologize for not having you on here. That is an oversight on my part. I apologize for that. So just first and foremost, where are we talking about? So our study boundary is an area of about 5 square miles. It's bounded to the south by Illinois, to the west by Cockrell Hill Road, and then Cockrell Hill, the town, and then Gilpin Road, to the north by Davis, and then it jogs south on Hampton, and then east on 12th, and then over on the east side by Tyler and Vernon Streets. So why are we planning? Councilmember West did an excellent job giving an explanation. One of the real impetuses for this planning effort has to do with the fact that there are 5 authorized hearings that are currently in the city's waiting list, and those are the areas that you see here on the map in purple. And they're kind of scattered throughout. They're areas where there's interest in exploring potential changes to the zoning. And so this planning effort will help provide critical feedback and community engagement to understand the types of land uses that you want to see in those areas. Additionally, this is an area that has 3 DART stations. There's the Westmoreland, the Hampton, and the Tyler Vernon station. And as the city thinks more long-term about transit-oriented development and locating jobs, goods, services, and residences near transit, it's important that we think about how we plan for land uses around those stations. And then lastly, growth is going to happen in Dallas, and this is something that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But it's important for us to think about how we can plan for that growth to minimize the impacts on the community. So what is the goal of this effort? First, it's to establish a land development vision for the study area. And that will be integrated into the update to the city's comprehensive plan, which is soon to begin. Secondly, the visioning and the engagement that will come out of this effort is going to help inform the authorized hearing process for those 5 authorized hearing locations that I mentioned just a second ago. Third, it's going to help create a framework for us understanding street and infrastructure improvements that are desired by the community. That could be where people want a road diet for wider sidewalks, where people want bike lanes, and all of that can help us inform future bond projects, capital improvements, work with public works so that they know that these are priorities for the neighborhood. And then lastly, it's important that this planning effort captures everything else that perhaps we aren't captured in those first 3. So if you'll remember back to our first public meetings for those who attended back in November, and then we had the Spanish meeting in January, we laid out 7 initial planning goals to get feedback on. And those were protect single-family neighborhoods, preserve natural areas and expand public parks and trails, preserve historic buildings by encouraging renovation and reuse, encourage businesses that are compatible with surrounding neighborhoods, improve transportation access through better street design and suitable development around DART stations, retain current residents and attract new residents by encouraging new and affordable housing choices, and then lastly, create walkable neighborhood centers that provide a variety of work, cultural, shopping, and living opportunities. So we really use those as a jumping off point to get feedback from the community. And we'll talk about that feedback that we got from the survey here in just a second. And then a lot of y'all are probably thinking, how long is this process going to last? So we're really about halfway through the process. Obviously, we're here in spring of 2021. The task force has been meeting for about a year now. So this process launched in late spring, early summer of 2020. Where we're at now is really the bulk of the community engagement. So this is a meeting that relates to the entire study area. And then as we'll talk about here at the end of the meeting, we have 3 upcoming meetings that really dive into some specific areas in West Oak Cliff. And so that's where we're going to get the greatest amount of feedback from y'all. We do have an online survey tool that we're obviously we'll talk about here in a few minutes as well. But that will help us begin the drafting process. And our plan is to take all the feedback we hear, go and draft the plan over the course of the summer, come back to the public with that. And once we feel that the public has vetted it and it feels comfortable with the plan, we'll begin the public adoption process, going to City Plan Commission and eventually to City Council. If everything goes well, the goal is to have this done by the end of the calendar year. It's possible just because of getting on the agenda, it might push to early in 2022, but that's the timeline that we're at right now. And then after that would be begin the implementation process. And that's really where the rubber meets the road from all the recommendations that'll come out of this plan. So something I mentioned just a second ago had to do with growth. Right now, West Oak Cliff has just under 44,000 residents and about 3,500 jobs. But we know that the city of Dallas and the Metroplex as a whole are expected to grow tremendously in the next 25 years. The Metroplex is expected to add 4 million new residents by 2045. Dallas is expected to add 400,000 new residents and up to 800,000 new jobs by 2045. So we know the growth is coming, and so it's important for us to plan for that. It's also important for us to think that an equitable distribution of citywide growth is important, and it can help enable parts of the city get their fair share of growth and opportunities for neighborhood revitalization. We want to make sure that all the growth doesn't just go to the northern half of the city. But we know that growth obviously brings change, and it's important that we plan ahead and think about what those changes might be so that we can mitigate those impacts before they ever even happen. And then lastly, the goal of this area plan is to determine how and where we should channel that growth and be sensitive to the neighborhood's history, the neighborhood's character, so that we're able to maximize the benefit to the community, as we move into the next 20 and 30 years. So I spoke about those public meetings that we had a few months back in November and in January. Many of you may have participated in the survey that we had online. We had great attendance at the meetings. We had great participation on the survey. We had 140 responses as of yesterday when we closed the survey. And that survey provided us really wonderful feedback. What we saw is that 90% of people who answered the survey they live in the area, 30% work in the area. And that makes a lot of sense because there's obviously a lot more residences here than there are jobs. And 80% of the folks who were on the call were property owners in the area. So we had folks talk about and answer questions about those 7 planning goals. And we also had people rank them, and ranked from the top 3. Number 1 was to protect existing single family neighborhoods. Number 2 was to create walkable neighborhood centers. And number 3 was to preserve and enhance natural areas and open spaces. So that really helped provide us a good, kind of idea of the concerns of the neighborhood. Additionally, this is just kind of a word cloud I pulled from all of the open-ended responses that we had. Obviously, you can see a lot of different things popping up: police presence and safety, traffic control, sidewalks, new development, art opportunities, bike lanes. So those were just a lot of the things that you and your neighbors were talking about. So what we did was we kind of tried to boil that all down and put them into different pots based on topic. So we've got land use and development, transportation and infrastructure, parks and open space, and community development. And those are really going to serve as the basis for tonight's meeting. And they're also going to serve as the kind of the foundational piers for this planning effort moving forward. So I'll just kind of read through what we heard. Obviously, we're the point of this meeting and moving forward is to continue to hear from you. So if there's something that we don't capture in these points, we definitely want to hear from you. You can put it in the chat. You can tell us later tonight, or you can we have a new survey up as well, so you can tell us there too. So for land use and development, there was preserve single family neighborhoods, but allow new housing in appropriate locations. Ensure important historic structures are able to find new life through potential zoning changes. Ensure new commercial and mixed-use development is compatible with surrounding neighborhoods. And then provide new mixed-use neighborhood center developments around the DART stations. Related to transportation and infrastructure, there was a desire for there to be improvements to sidewalks around parks, schools, and the DART stations. There was a desire for there to be new bike lanes in the area, and road diets and traffic calming and pedestrian improvements on some of the walkable retail corridors, such as Hampton. There was a desire for improved bus and multimodal transportation options around the area, especially around the DART stations. And then there was a general concern about public safety on streets, particularly related to street racing and lighting. For parks and open space, there was a desire for improved open space connections and new trails. There was a desire for new open spaces in areas that currently don't have open space. And there was a desire to preserve the existing tree canopy and enhance natural assets. And then lastly, we kind of grouped everything else into community development. So there was a desire to focus on local neighborhood-focused retail and development. There was a very large concern about housing and retail affordability, potential gentrification, and potential displacement due to growth and development pressures. And as a part of that, there was a desire for there to be tools and policies that allow existing residents to remain in place. So this is really just kind of a good starting point for us to think about this planning effort moving forward. But obviously tonight's purpose is for us to hear from y'all. And so what we're going to do in the course of the next 20 minutes or so is we're going to go through each of those 4 main topics, and we're going to ask a series of questions. And we're going to I encourage you to respond in the chat, but if you're unable to type in the chat for any reason, feel free to answer aloud. Just remember to try to keep your comments brief, just out of respect of time. But what we'll do is we'll spend a couple minutes on each slide. Obviously, something that, there's a large number of single-family neighborhoods in this area. And there's areas where I already talked about the authorized hearings that are in the queue. And so that's kind of helped us identify focus areas. And so that's going to be the purpose of the upcoming public meetings over the next 2 weeks. But for tonight's meeting, we really want for you to think about the entire study area. Maybe you don't live in one of these areas in yellow. So tell us what you think about in your neighborhood, and that'll help inform, that'll provide us some great feedback. All right, so let's get started with land use and development. I'll spend about 5 minutes on this slide and I'll read these questions aloud. First, are there locations where you have concerns about existing land uses or types of development? Second, are there specific locations where you would like to see new types of land uses? What types and where? And then are there areas that are stable that you would like to remain the same? So I'll give everybody a few minutes to answer those. Feel free to write in the chat, and please specify which one you're answering, just so that we know whenever we read the chat what you're talking about. So good. I see a comment from Anthony Rash about concern about changes in potential housing around the DART stations, and the concern about Tyler Vernon and the proposed rezoning. I will say that we are going to have a time at the end to answer some of these questions. I'm happy to answer it now, but I think it's an important one, and so we'll bring it back up so that we can make sure that folks who are maybe not on the call right now or who are in the other breakout room can hear it as well. So the authorized hearing, and Commissioner McGregor, feel free to kind of provide some feedback as well, because you're the one who's submitted the filing for the authorized hearing. The idea behind that, just like all other authorized hearings, is not that we are proposing to a change to the zoning. There's not a recommendation to increase the density. The idea is that it's an area that we're concerned that there already is development pressure because of its location next to the DART station. And it's important for us to think strategically about what the zoning looks like there, because we know that there's going to be continued push by developers to pursue changing the zoning. And so this area plan can provide a really strong structure and provide our zoning office with the tools that they need to know that the neighborhood is interested in this area remaining a single family neighborhood.
Thank you, Daniel. I'll jump in really quickly on status. So there was a request for an authorized hearing for that area of Tyler Vernon. It was presented to CPC last week on Thursday, and it failed. It was not approved. Therefore, it's gone. There's no authorized, there is no authorized zoning right now in the queue or anywhere else for that area.
So I'm seeing some great comments about the desire for potentially allowing things like accessory dwelling units. I'm seeing comments about people who are locations where street improvements are recommended, or where there's a desire for more open space. This is really great feedback, and I really appreciate it. We are going to dive into transportation and open space in a few slides. So if you've got more to say about that, you'll have more opportunities as well. But I really appreciate the feedback. I'll give everybody maybe just another minute or two to provide any more comments, and then we'll move on to the next slide.
Excuse me, Daniel.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Anthony. Thank you for taking my comment. And I just wanted to ask, it is about land use. Is there any potential discussion about land use revolving around agricultural zones or community community-driven gardens. I know that there are neighborhood associations doing that kind of work, but is there
Mhm.
anything going to be sanctioned by the city for, I would say, larger scale land use for folks who for folks in need? Thank you.
So we do have a zoning category for agriculture. I also know that, and I'm not super familiar with the code in terms of the specifics of what triggers, when a community garden is permitted versus when it gets triggered to being considered a full agricultural use. That's obviously something that we can look into and explore, especially if there's a specific area that you have concerns about or interest in. I know that Elmwood's got a great small neighborhood garden kind of in the downtown Elmwood area. But if there's other locations that you have in mind, please let us know, and we're happy to explore that further and do more research and see how that can be incorporated into this plan. So I'm seeing a question right now from Liz about specifics about development pressures. I think on a very general basis, the development pressure is just the fact that we know that the city of Dallas is going to grow by, 300,000 to 400,000 people in the next 20 years. And the city itself can't grow out because we're surrounded on all sides by other cities. And so that those new residences are going to have to be put in places where there currently aren't people living. That might be new apartments downtown. That might be new apartments scattered around the city. That might be new single family neighborhoods in places where there's currently vacant land. But we know that there's going to be new development coming. And so it's important for us to think about all areas of the city. And so that's just one thing that we're keeping in mind as we think about this planning effort. I see a comment from Yolanda. Is it correct that developers have to come forward and individually to rezone in the absence of a plan? And doesn't that make it more difficult for them? So it is correct that, regardless, any sort of zoning change would require an individual zoning application to be filed by that developer or that applicant. That happens regardless of if there's an area plan or not. What this area plan can do is, if there's an area in West Oak Cliff that the neighborhood is, very interested in remaining a single family neighborhood, and that is put in the plan, then when in the future, if a developer were to come into that area and say, I want to build an apartment here, that adopted plan is something that city staff can look at and the plan commission can look at and see very clearly in an adopted document that the neighborhood was not interested in having that land use there, and they're interested in remaining the same. Ultimately, the decision is that of the city plan commission and city council. That's just part of the political process. But this planning effort can help establish a much stronger framework about what should and can exist in a neighborhood than what exists today. Because right now there's really nothing that says what the neighborhood is interested in seeing.
And Daniel, if I can also chime in there, we have examples in other parts of the city that have area plans. The Oak Cliff plan the Oak Lawn plan is an example. And what we experience is that every subsequent rezoning request that is received by the city always gets matched up and assessed as to whether it's in conflict with the overall plan or is it in harmony with the overall plan. And so if you're asking for a rezoning and showing that what I'm asking for is in fact harmonious with the overall area plan, you might have a little step forward in getting it approved. Sort of a practical thing.
So I'm seeing a follow-up question from Yolanda that I think is important to address. She asked, if a property is rezoned through the authorized hearing, the developer would still have to apply for the zoning change. So that depends. If the authorized hearing, an authorized hearing's recommendation could be we're not changing the zoning, and the zoning's going to stay R75 or single family or whatever the zoning is. In that instance, if the developer were to come in and say, I want to build an apartment here, city staff would say, well, the area plan clearly says not to. And so the developer would have to file a zoning application. If, on the other hand, if, let's say, through the authorized hearing process, the neighborhood said, actually, we are interested in having multifamily here, or we are interested in townhomes, or whatever it is. And then that developer, after that, then the zoning gets changed through the public process. At that point, the zoning would no longer be single family. It would be townhomes or whatever it got changed to. And that at that point, the developer would not have to file an application. But until the zoning is changed, an application absolutely would have to be filed.
Hey, Daniel, can you define development pressures? A few people have asked what how you were using that term.
Sure, yeah, and I explained it earlier about growth. Really, I think development pressure is probably just another way to think about growth. The city can't grow outwards; it can only grow upwards. Now that we are surrounded on all sides by suburbs, and so that new housing has to go somewhere. It could be apartments downtown. It could be new single-family neighborhoods on vacant land. It could be infill development. But we know that people are moving to Dallas because of new jobs and opportunities, which is great for the city. But we know, so it's important for us to plan about where those people are going to live. So I'm seeing a lot of really great comments. I'm going to keep us moving, and please continue to add to the chat. We've got more questions that relate specifically to some other topics that we want to address. So next, we're going to talk about transportation and infrastructure. And so the first two questions that we have are, what street improvements would make walking and biking more enjoyable? And then, are there specific areas today that walking and biking does not feel safe? All right, getting some good comments. Vernon Avenue, separated and protected bike lanes on all roads wider than 40 feet. Most major streets are very unpleasant to walk on. The desire for separated bike lanes, ADA sidewalks. This is really great. Thank you all. Traffic calming on Clarendon from Tyler to Hampton. Walking and biking on Hampton Road does not feel safe. And so the next two questions are about transportation as well. So continue to answer the last questions, and they might relate to these next two. Where would you like to see bike lanes? And on what streets would you like to see better, wider sidewalks? And I know many of y'all kind of answered some of those already, but Wright Street along the dark rail line, Vernon Avenue. See that there are many streets in the neighborhood that don't have sidewalks: Clarendon, Jefferson, Ravinia, Westmoreland. Coombs Creek, Edgefield. And if you could specify if you're talking bikes or sidewalks or both, just so that whenever we go back and we read the chat, we know which one you were referring to.
Daniel, sorry to interrupt your train of thought and
Sure.
paying attention. There's a ton of great information coming in. Is staff capturing the chat? All the
we're going to save it at the end of the
meeting. It's moving so fast, and I can hardly keep up with it, and it is.
It's great.
Great
Yeah,
stuff.
This is excellent.
Keep it coming. Absolutely. Thank you.
So Yolanda, that's a great question about, will we be able to see this chat in the recorded version? I don't believe so. What we can do is find a way to kind of turn this into, because I think it saves out as just a text file. So we can make sure that we save this out and make it public, because obviously all this is open to public records anyways. So we'll definitely make sure that it's public and put on our website. I'm seeing a comment about a street not having any curbs. This is important for us to know because we can help inform future capital improvements. So just please let us know specifically where, and that will help us a great deal. So for the sake of time, I'm going to keep us moving. The next topic is for open space. And so we've got 3 questions here. What would encourage you to use the neighborhood parks and open spaces more? Are there specific areas you would like to see more open space or new trails? Where and what types of uses? And then are there any improvements you would like to see in accessing existing parks or open space?
Can I get Anthony Resch to elaborate on when he says equity for transportation, is that in relation to the question about what would encourage you to use neighborhood parks?
Sorry, and Mr. McGregor, I missed the last part of your question.
Oh, yeah, so you just posted something about equity and transportation, and my question is, were you raising that as understanding what would encourage you to use the neighborhood parks and open spaces more?
No, it had been something Mr. Riviera had mentioned, that the neighborhood should be the antithesis to a car-centric community, and transportation should be equitable.
Oh, yes.
And
Okay.
transportation being equitable, ties into accessibility. So accessibility is that linkage to the DART rail stations, right? So like a big push that I had heard for the development at Tyler Vernon was that it would increase ridership on the DART. Well, I don't buy that. I have training as a designer, and I don't buy that argument, because the ridership is here in the community, right? And it's the lack of ridership is because of the lack of access, and that access is only equitable when it is ADA or it is linked to someone's front door, right? So the city historically used to provide those connections, and now through changes, it no longer does. And that to me is what I was agreeing with when I hear equitable, equity, not equality, right? Equity.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, wow. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm seeing some really excellent comments in the chat about connecting transit and green spaces with comprehensive bike and ped facilities. Liz, I see a question about the Northcliffe Neighborhood Center. I'll speak to that more here later in the presentation. That's an area that is currently in the queue for an authorized hearing. It's a very small area in Northcliffe where there are some abandoned commercial buildings. They're kind of some really old, cool, historic buildings that were built at the end of the streetcar line before World War II. And so that's an area that is vacant for a lot of reasons. But the authorized hearing was filed by then Commissioner West a couple of years ago to explore, what opportunities might exist in that area to think about bringing those buildings back to life. I see a comment about, I'd like to see more parks with walking trails. Martin Weiss is nice, but for those who live east of Westmoreland, we have to cross a busy road to walk there. That's very helpful. Make Clarendon and Hampton walkable and pleasant, and you will accomplish a lot. Desire for cleaner parks within every quarter mile. And it is worth noting that actually something that the Trust for Public Land has done is they've done an analysis of the city to highlight areas that are not within a half mile of parks. And as you can see on the map on the screen, kind of right there in the middle at Clarendon and Hampton, that's an area that whole area doesn't have any open space. So that definitely showed up in their analysis. All right. Looks like we've got a few more comments coming in. Coombs Creek Corridor connecting Jefferson down to 5 Mile Creek Trail. Activating the medians as boulevards and green space. These are all really excellent comments. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead, and it looks like there's comments definitely about the center of the study area, the plan area, Clarendon and Hampton, and lack of open space there. Thank you for letting us, for providing that information. So I'm going to move us to the last topic, community development. This is kind of about safety and other concerns in the neighborhood. So where do you feel safe, and where are there locations that you feel unsafe? What do you like about recent changes in the area, and what are you most concerned about? And then what do you see as the best future for your neighborhood? And could you just let us know which one you're answering so that we kind of know what which one you're which one you're talking about when you're talking about safety or unsafety or things like that.
Maybe refer to them as bullet 1, bullet 2, or bullet 3.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
Miss Abrego, by better sanitation rules, are you referring to trash in the streets, or is it something in addition to that?
And Daniel, I see your comment about recent changes, Tyler Station development. Could you specify if that's a concern, or if that's something that you're concerned about, or something that you like? It was a positive. Okay, excellent.
Guadalupe Abrego, I don't know if you heard me before, but I was asking about your question of enforcing better sanitation rules on our street. Are you referring to trash along the streets, or is it anything in addition to that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, most of my neighbors around here are renters, and the landowners or the homeowners don't provide the appropriate containers. Most of them, the lids are broken off the bin. I talked to one of the owners, and he says, "Well, I can't afford to pay for another bin." I don't know that that's very expensive, because they will keep the trash from flying from the bin, landing on its side, and the trash going all over the street. So that also. And of course, I know there's issues right now with the bulk trash, because it takes 2 to 3 weeks for our trash to be picked up. And I've seen that, in other areas, but a lot of it in my area, it's really bad.
There's across the street from me, there's stuff that, and we know there's a broader
Yeah.
But yes, but thank you for your input.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
So we've been getting some really excellent feedback here in the chat, and I really appreciate it. It's too much for me to read through. I'm seeing comments about not feeling safe on 12th Street because of speeding, or locations where people feel unsafe biking. Best future for the neighborhood, families and homes, affordable housing, green spaces and bike lanes, and walkable sidewalks. Comments about increasing trash receptacles through parks and open space and along pedestrian corridors. So it definitely sounds like the cleanliness of the neighborhood is an interest. Concern about speeding on Brooklyn and on Catherine Streets. Speeding on 12th Street. So this is really, really helpful information. So I'll give everybody another minute or two to answer, and then we're going to move on to some polling questions. So Joe, I see you back in the room. It looks like there was nobody in the Spanish breakout session, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end that breakout session.
Yeah, and I think continuing on in English without the dual translation, I think that'd be a good time to do that.
All right, so again, feel free to continue to comment into the chat. At this point in the meeting,
Looks like Daniel is experiencing some issues there. I'm pretty sure he's going to say at this point in the meeting we were going to go to dual English and Spanish. I don't have control of the PowerPoint to be able to go forward, so we have to give him a few minutes while they wrap this up, fix this. Maybe I do if I can. I'm co-host.
Daniel has 4 screens up, so he will figure out a way to be right back with us quite shortly.
Okay, good. Because I was getting ready to start clicking buttons.
We can do that if we need to.
Okay. Well, he's
that
got me as a
should-
co-host, and there's somebody else as a co-host. I was just wondering if I'm able to take control of it as co-host.
I don't think you would be, Joe. I think you can control a meeting, but I don't think you can control his PowerPoint.
Right, I didn't think so either. Thank you.
Because that's just on his computer.
Got it. Yeah.
Hi there, Daniel.
Maybe
It's
having two-
Yolanda. While we were working on that, I just had a quick question that I thought it'd be easier to ask.
Okay.
So it seems like some of the things that I've seen in the chat, some of them have to do with code issues. Would that sound correct?
Yes.
So is there a way that we can work with those folks and the appropriate people from maybe Neighborhood Vitality to connect us with code so that
Yeah.
these are things that we can start to address, more in the short
Yes.
term. And I'm happy to assist in any way that I can.
Sure, and I can tell you a couple of things. We have a code representative assigned to this area, and that information will be available at the end of this presentation. And
I'm
you can
back. Sorry.
always email.
My computer completely crashed.
Oh my gosh.
My entire command station at City Hall just crashed on me. So if everybody can give me a few minutes to.
Okay, and I was just answering a question, so go ahead and so we do have a code representative, and however, I also recommend that for each code concern that you have, that you specifically make a entry complaint, if you will, via 311, and make sure you keep a record of the reference number that is assigned to that code case. And then use that to follow up. If they don't respond, you can always use that code reference number and follow up with your city council member's office. And sometimes they can take that code reference number and help to escalate a particular issue. We've seen that happen a lot for neighbors when they don't get a particular response on a code concern.
Can everybody see my screen, the slides now?
Yes.
I can see it. Yes.
Okay, so unfortunately, I'm on my laptop now. Luckily, I came with my own laptop.
Plan B.
So my computer is completely restarting. But so I'll do our best to run through where we're at right now. So what we were gonna do at this point would have been to have done a report out where the feedback from the English speaking room was going to be translated into Spanish, and then vice versa from the Spanish room. What was heard there was going to be translated back to everybody. So obviously we're not going to be able to do that, or we might not necessarily need to do that because it seems like everybody was in the English meeting. That said, if somebody is interested in having anything translated, please let us know, and we're obviously happy to do that. So I do have my computer rebooting as we speak, and I do want us to be able to do some of these polling questions, and I'm going to have to do it from there. So I'm going to skip that section of the presentation just for a few minutes. And what I can do is move us to talk a little bit about next steps, and then we can go back and do some of those polling questions because we definitely want to capture that feedback. So first and foremost, and again, we're happy to translate these slides. And Joe, maybe we can go ahead and I'll read them in English, and then you can go ahead and translate them into Spanish.
I'll leave that up to you. I'm not sure if we need to do that
Okay.
because, like I said, we had nobody on the other side. Commissioner McGregor, what do you think?
I agree that I don't think the simultaneous translation is necessary right now. But
Okay.
if somebody on the chat would like that, we'll keep an eye on that. But it seems like everybody's doing well with the English.
I agree.
All right. So the first and most important thing is to continue to give us feedback. Obviously, we have a new tool. The website link is here, and if somebody from my team could go ahead and throw that link into the chat. It's on a tool called Social Pinpoint, and some of you might have been familiar with that based on the Sidewalk Master Plan. And what it'll do is it has an interactive mapping tool where folks can leave specific comments about an area. You could say, I have concerns about sidewalks at this location, or I'm concerned about any issue. You can zoom all the way in down to your house and tell us information. But then additionally, it has surveys that relate to each of the focus areas that we're going to have some of these upcoming meetings about. And what that'll do is allow us to get really specific information about what you're interested in those specific areas. Additionally, we also have a paper copy of the survey that's going to be available on from May 1st to July 31st at the Martin Weiss Recreation Center. And so what that's going to be a mapping. There's going to be a map where you can provide comments, and we have some questions on. And then it's also going to be there's a large 25 question survey, which is also on the Social Pinpoint website. So for folks who, and we have that in Spanish and English. And so for folks who might not have internet access or feel more comfortable doing a paper survey, it's just going to be at the front desk of the Recreation Center, and then you can return it back to the front desk. And we're also working with neighborhood association leaders to get them paper copy surveys as well, and they can distribute those out to you as well. So lastly, or next, I did mention those focus areas, and I know that came up at the beginning when we were talking about land use. One thing that sorry, I'm currently joining on both my screens, so I hope we don't get a bunch of feedback as I speak. So what we will what we have is we've got 7 areas where there's either authorized hearings in the queue, or there are areas that through the task force and through other public feedback, there's interest in just learning more about the kinds of land uses that we want to see there. And so that's Westmoreland Station area, Hampton Station area, downtown Elmwood, Tyler Vernon Station area, Hampton Clarendon, and the Jimtown neighborhood. What we're calling is the Northcliffe Neighborhood Center, and I answered Liz's question earlier about that, and then the West Davis corridor. And so what we've done so that we don't have 7 individual meetings about those areas is we've kind of grouped them. So we're going to have 3 meetings over the course of the next 2 weeks. They're going to also be done on WebEx, just like this. And so those meetings are on May 4th. Downtown Elmwood and Tyler Vernon will be next Tuesday on May 4th. Hampton, Clarendon, Jimtown, Northcliffe, and West Davis will be Monday, May 10th. And then Westmoreland, Hampton Station areas will be on Tuesday, May 11th. So if you give me just 1 second, I'll be able to, I have the polling up, so I'll be able to double back. So unless there's any questions about that, I'm going to go back to the polling questions, and that way we can kind of get back to where we were. All right, give me 1 second. Well, it looks like the the polling seems to be disabled for some reason. So what we're gonna do is we'll ask these questions and people can just answer in the chat. I apologize that it has to be like this. The my computer at work is not working with me. So the first question is, what types of land uses would you like to see in and around the West Oak Cliff area? And so basic goods and services, restaurants, childcare options, community and senior centers, recreation centers and libraries, grocery stores and pharmacies, nearby offices, industrial and warehouses, gas stations and auto repair uses, parks and open space, or other. And so please, if you could just answer in the chat, and we'll give everybody a few seconds to do that, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Daniel, while people are writing down their responses, I'd like to ask if I would love to hear if of the people who are here today, do you feel specifically that within your area you have appropriate grocery store coverage? And what I'm getting at is I know there are parts of Dallas that talk about food desert zones, and just let us know if you feel like something's missing there.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I love it that
Right.
nobody's putting in. Oh, we lost your screen.
I'm sharing my screen. There we go. Can y'all see that now? Or y'all are seeing?
Yes, yeah, we can now again. Nobody's putting in gas stations, which tells me that we have a very walkable, interested community.
There we go. Okay.
Or that we
Maybe I
already
can
have too
make
many
this
gas
work.
stations.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. I apologize for some of these technical difficulties. Next question is, are there specific land uses you would not like to see? So again, feel free to answer in the chat, and I'm gonna do my best to see if I can get polling up and enabled, but it might not work with us this time. All right, we actually might be in luck. Let me try this one and this one. How about this? Does that pop up on people's screens? Right? No, there we go. Are y'all able to see that poll?
Yeah,
Well,
we
did it
see
work,
that.
Daniel?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, you can click on that and hit submit when you're finished, and use the scroll bar to scroll up and down.
And question number 2 is just the Spanish version of the exact same question. So feel free to just answer one of the questions. Doesn't matter which one you answer.
In the chat, people who are saying they want more industrial warehouses in the district, if you could elaborate on that. I've never seen residents ask for more warehouses in the time I've been at City Plan Commission.
Enrique, I think they didn't see the words "not like," or maybe they were answering the question, because I answered all the stuff I wanted to that question,
Yes.
so I got a little twisted on that.
Thank you. I did not see the words "not like." I thought we were on the same one. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going, what's
And
going
I'm happy to go back to the first one, which is what is things that you. So this is what would you like? This is what you would like to see. Sorry, I'm sorry, my slide is not matched
It
up.
was my mistake.
Okay.
My mistake. People are paying
Well, I
attention.
answered it wrong, so it would be helpful probably to get a redo.
Okay, I apologize for that.
The same here. I answered it wrong.
Okay, well, we can close the poll, and then I'll see if I can restart it. So we'll we'll make sure that we do this right. We want the right input.
Thank you. And I think for what it's worth, the chat part is very, very helpful because it clarifies what they meant. So yeah, no, nobody's asking.
Hey, Mr. McGregor.
Yes.
I did put in industrial or warehouse spaces, and by that, I mean, that building type is very specific to what the use is. So, I mean, if you have a makerspace that still has to be, typically that's going to be, you know, the building type will be F for that industrial building type. So that wouldn't necessarily mean that we are interested in maybe having like a steel shop around us, but having something of a lower use, so F1 as opposed to F2, would be maybe
Like
more
smaller
of
warehouse.
interest.
Smaller warehouse storage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's something the city's interested in, but I know that like having those nodal zones of connectivity are really could be important. So
Okay, I hear you. Thank you. Yeah.
Anthony, this is Theo Chapter, Director of Planning and Design. And to that excellent point that you're making, you may want to take advantage of the option K or other so that you can provide some more clarity on that, because it
Yes,
seems
sir.
like you're in a very particular or specific type of use.
Yes, sir.
I think that would be very helpful if you can clarify.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So I've just reopened the poll so that way people can answer correctly. So this is what you would like to see in and around West Oak Cliff.
So yes, people can re-answer the question.
Yes, I didn't save any of the results last time. Don't worry about it.
I took pictures of those results, Daniel.
Good, that's helpful. Yeah, I guess it'll kind of be saved in the log as well. So, okay, I don't see a few more answers coming in. We'll give everybody another couple 30 seconds or something to answer, and then we'll move on.
And just pointing out as I'm filling it out myself that you have to scroll down to get, you may have to scroll down to get to the last of the options all the way down to K.
All right, so what I can do is show everybody the results. It looks like that basic goods and services was the #1 result, and the #2 was recreation centers and libraries and parks and open spaces. Obviously, no answer was the highest, but so we really appreciate that. What I'll do is we'll move on to the next one. It'll go the exact same way.
And on another note, the no answers, we have several staff members that are present, so that would account for the high number of no answers.
That's true. All right, so I just opened the poll for what you would not like to see in and around West Oak Cliff. I'll give everybody a few more minutes. Looks like we've got a few people finishing up. Go ahead and give 20-second warning. All right, so the top two were not wanting auto repair uses in gas stations, and then industrial uses and warehouses. Those by far stood out above the rest. And I know that some people put some things in the chat, like LIHTC housing and luxury apartments. So I saw that, and we've definitely captured that. So I appreciate that. All right, so we'll do we got a few more polling questions coming up. I appreciate y'all staying on. So the next one relates to transportation and infrastructure. So this is, how do you travel to work? How do you travel to daily needs? How often do you walk in the area? And how often do you bike in the area?
So Daniel, I noticed that you can't check more than once, one thing, right? So it has to be what you do most often.
Correct, yeah.
For example, I sometimes drive to the grocery store, or I might walk.
Yeah, I would guess, and I understand that it's a little confusing. So maybe choose the one that you, the primary way that you go to the grocery store. All right, looks like we have a few more folks still answering. I'll give them another 30 seconds, and then we'll close the poll. And if I'm moving too fast, please let me know. Having not answering them myself, it's kind of hard to know how fast I'm moving. All right. So it looks like driving alone was the number 1 way to both get to work and to get around the neighborhood. And then it also looks like people, the majority or the plurality of people walk daily. And then, but the majority of folks never bike in the neighborhood. So that's very helpful for us to understand.
Daniel, may I add something?
Absolutely.
I think the reason we have low bike ridership is because we'd have unsafe bike options. So
that's a very good point.
I would be willing to bet that if we had better options, I know for myself, I used to bike frequently, and I don't at this time for a lot of the reasons people were saying. So I wonder if there's some more investigation there about hypothetical options for, improving not just access to that transportation style, but also to those the need of those shops, right? So bike shops and that sort of thing too.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And we had some really great comments about where people wanted bike lanes and improvements, and that's really important for us to know. So I'm going to keep us moving. I'm going to move us to the next slide about parks and open space. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so make sure that you're muted if you're not talking. Oh, you're getting feedback from me? It didn't make sense.
We're okay at the moment. We're not getting any feedback right now.
So those questions are, do you wish there were more open spaces and parks in the area? Do you actively use any of the parks or trails in the West Oak Cliff area? And then what type of park or open space would you most like to see in your neighborhood? So that's, obviously you might want all of them, but just select the one that would be most important to you. I see a question from Marco about, has the city of Dallas created a community plan by gathering input 100% online? Obviously, this planning effort has been different and challenging compared to most. We enjoy in-person meetings as much as y'all do, and so we miss them, and we know that this is not a perfect solution. Right now, the city more or less has a moratorium on in-person events. That said, we are working to think through solutions to continue to get input in some safe, outdoor, socially distant ways. We haven't exactly figured out what that looks like just yet, and we will let everybody know as soon as we have an idea. It might be as simple as Monique and I tabling at a few locations around the study area to get input and get people and help people take the survey. We might be able to have, an open house session outdoors somewhere. So we're working through those, and we obviously want to have some sort of an in-person meeting, especially as it looks that numbers related to COVID continue to get better, because we know that that's really critical.
So how do we ensure that happens? I think that's a critical piece of this, and it seems a lot of it is missing. And I'm sure if you look at the results of these polls themselves, I mean, statistical significance requires just a percentage of people to actually participate. And having 0 people in the Spanish language forum has probably more to say about outreach than anything else, right?
Yeah, no,
is that Marco? I can't quite hear what he said. Can you please repeat it?
Yeah, Marco, go ahead and repeat your comment and try to.
So it goes back to a comment that I was just kind of. Can you hear me now?
You're okay. We can sort of hear you.
All right. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. So I'm just it's unprecedented times, right? And I think that we're sort of I think one of the things that came away from the CPC meeting was a bit of concern about the size of the thousands of acres that are included in this community plan. And we're doing that in the context of an all-line sort of format. And I think that just gauging from the participation in the survey and participation in these meetings and just how many people were on the Spanish language forum, I think we're getting data in terms of how much inclusivity we're getting or how much participation we're getting. So how can we sort of take a measurable sort of quantitative approach to making sure that we're having a robust conversation about gathering community input as we move forward.
Yeah, so let me start just reacting to that. Marco, I think you're absolutely right. I think we know that is a very real challenge. So the area plan, the outcome of it will be a lot better if we do hear from the folks that are within a demographic group that is not participating. So it's been said in the chat before, we have a lot of Spanish-speaking people that are not here, and we need their input to really make a better quality area plan. I don't know the answer. I think from the very beginning, about a year ago or so, when this process started, Steph and I have talked about the fact that we need an extra effort for that. It's harder than almost anywhere else, and yeah. So I don't know if you were asking a question or making a statement, but I just want to tell you I agree with you. And
so it was a question. So a question is like, how do we? So we have we're taking a very quantitative approach, right? We're using surveys, we're using polls, So how are we, like, what KPIs are we using to sort of measure that? Because the data that I'm seeing is saying that we're not getting sort of the holistic feedback that we would have maybe hoped for.
So let me.
I think that's true. I think we're not getting the feedback from that group of the community. But I guess my question to Daniel about this is this you're using the result of these surveys to give you directional sort of directional information, right? You're not saying, okay, they voted more for this, so we're going to do parks, not da da da. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. And again, I kind of want to reiterate that we still have a lot more community engagement to go. The kickoff meeting was to just kind of help us frame the initial starting point. This information tonight is important. The next 3 public meetings are important. So we encourage you to get the word out to your friends and neighbors to attend. But that's not the only way to give input. We're going to have the online survey tool, and we also are going to have an in-person survey that is available for pickup, and we're going to distribute that to the neighborhood associations. I say all that to say that we still know that is not enough, and that we would like to do some in-person meetings over the summer. Obviously, outdoors in the summer in Dallas is going to be hot, but we'll suffer through it, and we'll make it happen. And I think your question about the KPI, I think, and that's a good one, and I think that something that kind of typically seen for like comprehensive plans in large cities around the country as thought to be good quality engagement is to engage between 1% to 2% of the population. I know that doesn't specifically break down into demographic groups. I was worried that the lights were going to turn out in my department. They just did. But that didn't break down into demographic groups. But so 1% to 2% of the West Oak Cliff area would be somewhere between 500 and 1,000 people providing us feedback. So we haven't obviously received that much thus far, but we know that it's still early, and so we encourage folks to continue to get the word out, because really we've just begun the public input part of this plan.
And let me add a couple of things. I want people to know that we also we've been working with some of our task force partners who graciously helped us distribute flyers, 800 to different people in the neighborhood, and we tried to provide them at a few spots around town. We're kind of just getting to the point where we could even safely interact that way, to even interact with folks closely enough to even get flyers in people's hands. And then we had a Spanish kickoff meeting that we had 30 participants, which again is not a lot, but that was something that we also did. And we also send this information out through all of our social media and through other means of sharing with various partners that we have. In addition to that, we are open to coming to specific neighborhood association meetings and doing presentations. If you have those meetings online, we could try to do that and sort of do little mini versions of, not mini, but versions of the presentation and survey at various neighborhood association meetings is another opportunity. We're looking to work with various partners to share this information, but we really couldn't do a lot of things like, interacting very closely as we were, it just wasn't even very possible until pretty recently. So we've pushed that envelope as much as we can safely do up to this point.
And I just want to add to that. Yeah, so we all know that it's a challenge. I do think we'll need to think creatively as a way to come up with ways to draw out this part of our community to participate. So the traditional sending an email or which it's already been said, the email by itself is a challenge, right? But I don't have that idea. I don't know what that creative.
Well, that's why we printed out 800 flyers, hard copy, and gave them to different people who were kind enough to share those with other people or within their own neighborhoods, up and down those, block walking themselves. So that's old school, and we're trying to just kind of get that information directly into people's hands who may not have internet access.
Mhm.
So
So by no means, I just don't want it to be my comments to be misconstrued. I appreciate the effort, and I think there's been a robust sort of effort, and I appreciate the ability to participate in it. I think just we have to be just cognizant of the times, right? And just my neighborhood association hasn't met in over a year at all, right?
right.
And if we think about like KPIs, I think that was very good information. We want to get like 1 to 2% participation, but right now I'm probably rounding up if I tell you that we have 30 basis points participation based on your survey numbers and on the people on this call, right? So that's a third of the way of the low end of what a good sort of input gathering is in a normal format. So I would just challenge you all to be like, if I don't think it's the effort, it's just the timing. And I think that I think that's something that should be considered if we really want to, if community input is at the center of what you're trying to do. But again, I think the effort is real, and I appreciate it, and I applaud it. But we also kind of go to look at the KPIs and just allow that to drive this as well.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of also again balancing people's hierarchy of concerns right now are even a little bit different. Just trying to survive, and maybe their circumstances are so incredibly different right now that we have to also kind of keep that in mind. I think just realistically. So yes, but we will continue to think out of the box, and please feel free to reach out to us and email any ideas that you have, and we're happy to try to pursue those.
If I can add on to what Marco was saying, I think he's bringing up a lot of good points, because talking about unprecedented times, I mean, we're talking about offices are going to be 60% full from capacity from what they were, this time 18 months ago. And that's kind of true across boards and sectors. And I think that even, that gives us the opportunity to do things differently, in the sense that, engaging with paper flyers might not be the way to go, and re-engaging in meeting the community where they're at is a way that maybe we can set ourselves apart as a district and as a community neighborhood that says, this is how we deal with our community. And that could mean something like setting up a tent at Fiesta Mart to get people's input and their signature to say that this is what that input looks like. Because again, to Marco's point, an intuitive part, something I'm kind of reading between the lines, is that not everyone has that internet access to join, right?
Yeah, and we just we have guidelines about interfacing that closely as staff.
Sure,
COVID concerns.
Yeah, and I'm not telling anyone to not be unsafe. But there's definitely ways that there are we can be creative, and I think that's what these meetings are all about, is that creativity and community. So
Absolutely. I'm going to keep us moving. We just got a few more slides, and I know we're past 7, and so I just want to be respectful of time. This is an incredibly important topic, and we're happy to stay on afterwards and chat about it. And we're also happy to share we're going to share our contact information. We're happy to work with folks afterwards to make sure that we do our 100% effort in this regard. So our last poll questions just relate to community development. They're short. Are you concerned about recent changes in West Oak Cliff? And then, are you concerned about public safety in the area? I see a question from Anthony about what changes are you referring to. I think we intentionally left that a little vague. If there's specific changes that you are concerned about, let us know. It could be the price of housing. It could be crime. It could be the change in neighborhood culture or character. It could be the loss of a store that you really liked. I mean, I think any of those things are things that we want to capture. All right, so I'll give people just a few more seconds, and then we'll wrap up the polling, and we'll kind of wrap up the meeting. And I really appreciate everybody staying on longer and providing us just incredible feedback. It's kind of nice that maybe the one good thing about an online meeting versus a in-person meeting is I get to save all the comments that you put in the chat out and read them versus a public meeting when we're trying to frantically scramble and take notes and people are speaking at different tables and an open mic. It's hard to capture everybody's comments, but now we've been able to capture everybody's comments.
Maybe something to think about for the future when we do have public meetings. I mean, it seems like the volume of information coming out is so much. If we could find a hybrid, when we go back to the time where we can meet in person, it'd be great to find an app sort of a way to have people provide input real time and for people to read each other's comments.
Yeah, there are those now. There's several of them.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Awesome.
You can use your phone even, some of them.
Wow, that would be awesome.
So I already talked through next steps, and we talked about this. Once again, we really encourage you to go to this website. There's a lot of interactive questions. It should be, there's an option there to translate it into Spanish. Actually, you can translate it in any language you want. So we obviously know that this is limited to folks who have internet access, and so we'll obviously, besides the paper survey, we'll think of other solutions to get feedback from those who don't have internet access. But this is still a critical way to provide us feedback. And I've already talked about these upcoming meetings. I think what we might do is do the last couple slides, and then we're happy to stay on to answer some questions, as I have to turn my lights back on. In City Hall, I'm in the dark now. So once again, we mentioned that we want to bring attention to your DPD representative, Brian Martinez, as well as the code compliance representative, Dennis Brodnax. Here's their contact information. So if you have specific issues related to neighborhood safety or code compliance issues, please reach out to them. And if you've got other specific issues, contact 311. You can either call 311 if you're inside the city limits, or you can go to their website or their app. And then lastly, if you have more to say, reach out to us. Monique and I are happy to talk anytime. Obviously complete our survey, but here's our contact information. Please feel free to
email.
Yeah, email is probably better right now as we're mostly out of the office. But we're coming in some, and we can obviously check our voicemails as well. So we're happy to to work with y'all and communicate you in any way possible. I see a comment about the contact for code compliance. What I might do, I know that was kind of quick. I'll go back to this slide and just keep that open for a few seconds so that folks can take that information down. And then I'll go to the next one, which has our contact information.
And going back to what Daniel said about contacting him and or Monique, that if you do know of a Spanish speaker and that is their, that's what they're requesting, someone to speak with Spanish, to definitely let Monique and Daniel know, and we'll provide somebody that speaks Spanish, and the information, the presentation also in Spanish.
Absolutely. And all these materials, the slides, we have these translated. All of our materials are translated. Those will be available on our website, and we're happy to distribute them to y'all in person as needed as well. And then so lastly, here's our contact information. That's all we have for tonight. We're happy to stay on as long as needed and answer any additional questions. Again, we appreciate everybody's time this evening. Your input was really, really great feedback and answers to a lot of those questions. It gives us a lot of material to start with. But once again, I want to remind people about the 3 upcoming meetings on May 4th, May 10th, and May 11th. They will be just like this one. They'll be on WebEx. And those are going to be a more deeper dive into those specific areas. So if you live in the downtown Elmwood or Tyler Vernon Station area and you have concerns or interest in that area, please attend that meeting on May 4th. So that's it. Thank you, everybody. I'll stay here sitting in the dark at City Hall. the lights went out and I can't turn them back on. I'm trying to frantically wave my hands and they're not kicking back on.
Daniel, I'm out. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye-bye,
for sending-
Monique.
Thank you, city staff.
Commissioner McGregor.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you
It's-
for your input.
Joe, absolutely. Monique, Daniel, this has been fantastic. To the people who remain as participants, I am so thankful for their input and engagement. I couldn't get enough information. I think a lot of great stuff is going to come out of this, and I also feel like we've just begun to scratch the surface on community input. So thank you guys. I'm going to drop off as well. And
Thank you, Commissioner McGregor.
thank you. I'll send Councilman West a quick text to let him know how well it went, in my opinion. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great meeting, Monique and Daniel.
Thanks, Carnell.
Thank you, Carnell.
I don't think I've ever almost had a heart attack more than when my screen, everything just went black.
Bless your heart.
Thank goodness I have my laptop, like my own personal laptop, just sitting there, and I was able to just like immediately get on the meeting. But it just, I mean, all my screens just went black. And then Brian texted me and he was like, "Hey, you're frozen." And I was like, "Well, I realize that now. I can't do anything." But I don't know.
You get an A for effort when you have 4 screens up. I don't know what else you can do, man.
It completely rebooted itself. I don't know why. So
Well, Daniel, Monique, Joe, and Sam, and anybody else on the team who helped, great effort. Thank you so much for your.
I think it's fair.
I think it's really good effort. I know we can always, do more to get better engagement, but I think this is a really outstanding job.